medical appointment, so I did not get to be here at 2. I was still being poked and prodded and checked out, and y'all be happy to hear I got a great big gold star for my healing and health efforts after my most recent surgery. So, yay! But I am back and I have got things scheduled in some places and ready to be scheduled in others for the rest of the week. Um, Again, we're talking about non monogamy this week in Little Quickies because we have coming up at the end of next week the It's Not Cheating event. There we go. It's Not Cheating, notcheating.com. And yeah, super excited about that. That is a free to attend event for anyone who is interested in non monogamy of any sort. So, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, including like the asymmetrical or unequal non monogamy, like cuckolding or pimping or hot wifing or that sort of thing. So this event is free to attend. It's January 27th through 29th. Super, super excited to have that coming up. This is our second It's Not Cheating weekend event. So yay! Hello, Facebook user. So for some reason, when people join via my groups, I need to figure this out. It doesn't show me who you are speaking, unfortunately. So hello, Facebook user. Whereas when people join me via like YouTube or via the pages, I do see your name. So sorry about that I won't be able to address you directly by name. But let's talk about non-monogamy. And let's talk about what's wrong with non-monogamy, because I really want to be clear here. I am not the sort of person who proselytizes. I am not, getting up on my pulpit saying non-monogamy for all, yay, you get a partner and you get a partner and you get a partner. Like, not doing that. Oh, hey, Celine. Hi. I'm not that type of person. I don't feel that non-monogamy is for everyone. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it's probably not for most people. And that's okay, right? Let's look at some things that are limited in this world, right? Green eyes, 2% of the population, right? Olympic athletes, I think smaller than 2% of the population, right? They're a small select group. And while non-monogamy is not quite so small and not quite so select, it is still not for everyone. And again, that's okay. So, simple question. What's wrong with non-monogamy? I have a simple answer. The same things that are wrong with monogamy, only multiplied. Right? The only thing that is different, really, is that when it comes to monogamy, you're dealing with all of this relationship-y stuff, theoretically, with one person. And in ethical non-monogamy, you're potentially doing this with more than one person. Other than that, it's really just all the same stuff multiplied. The challenge is people don't think that. People think this non-monogamy thing is a whole nother level. And it kind of is, but only because when you start doing the non-monogamy thing and you start learning about non-monogamy and polyamory and open relationships and swinging and all of these things, you start becoming aware of more things you've been doing fudged up in all of your relationships. So we can get a little bit more complex here. Everything that can go wrong in monogamy can go wrong in non-monogamy, but with more people and potentially way more angst and drama and whatever. Potentially. Because realistically, in monogamy, I've experienced all of these things that I'm going to present to you, and they can be catastrophic in monogamous relationships as well as in non-monogamous relationships. Hey, Cobalt, thank you. This is a bowler I've had for a while, and I was like, hey, why not wear a hat? It didn't have anything to do with like figuring out that I was running behind today or anything and wanting to get something on my hair. No, because it's a cool hat. Okay, so let's start with the first thing that is wrong with non-monogamy. And I bet if you ask 10 people what is wrong or what could go wrong with non-monogamy, 7 of them are going to say jealousy, right? The green-eyed monster. In fact, I'm doing a non-monogamous challenge next week. It is free to attend live. Let me get you that link. There we go. Share that with you. And there you go. notcheating.com/challenge, right? I am going to talk about the 5 most important skills, foundational skills for non-monogamy, and jealousy is going to be one of them. So jealousy is an obvious thing. As Cobalt says, hit that like button and show me some love. Thank you for the reminder. I'm terrible about that. Hello, Sir Thomas. Always a pleasure to see you. So let's talk jealousy, because jealousy is the obvious one, right? What's wrong with non-monogamy? Jealousy. But interestingly, for myself, I've experienced more jealousy in monogamous relationships than in all of my non-monogamous relationships combined. Now, maybe because in my non-monogamous relationships, I have been some combination of aware enough and lucky enough that there's been openness. But the first time I remember feeling jealousy was with my first boyfriend when he came back from a trip to Germany. He'd gone to Germany, and he was showing me photos of, the people that he met on his trip. And in one of these photos, there's this beautiful German girl. And I don't know why or how, I looked at that photo and I knew instantly, without a shadow of a doubt, that they had had sex. And he was still my boyfriend. And I asked him, and he denied it. And I felt jealous. I felt fear. I felt loss. Like deeply. It hurt me so much. He was lying to me and hiding what he'd done. I mean, he did eventually admit it over a year later after I'd ended our relationship. For me, though, looking back, Zaphod B says, trust issues? No, no. I knew he cheated for whatever reason. I don't go around accusing people of things often or easily. I never have. It's never been a thing for me, but I knew. And in that case, I was actually right. Um, Cobalt, sad that he only felt safe telling you then. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thing is, I mean, I already knew. And I knew that he was willing to lie to me to get something that he wanted, the continuance of the relationship, peace and quiet, or to avoid something he didn't want, arguing, whatever. And to me, and I'm not saying that this is true for anyone else, but to me, the jealousy, that fear and loss in a relationship pops up strongly when I feel people are being evasive and distancing themselves emotionally in order to lie or in order to hide things, or for any other reason, really. And not because they're interacting with other people. The interacting with other people is not the issue for me. It's the distancing and the lying and that sort of thing that triggers jealous type feelings in me in particular. Now, on the other side of things, I have been the target of jealousy, oh, so many times, primarily in my monogamous relationships. And I'll tell you what, I never cheated, never once, ever, 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 ever. And yet I was yelled at, I was accused, I was called a liar, I was called a slut, I was treated badly for things I never did by people who originally said they wanted some sort of non monogamous relationship. Apparently, they didn't want that to apply to me, right? I was the target of their jealousy. And yet they told me over and over and over again that they trusted me. They just didn't trust my masculine friends. What the fuck does that mean? Like, they trust me, but they don't trust that person. And so somehow I'm just going to accidentally fall into bed with them. And Jan, same, big same, right? Like, it's crazy. And both of those relationships, I mean, they lasted about 20 years total together. Both of those relationships started out both kinky and non monogamous. And they ended with them being incredibly possessive and mean about just like gentle flirting with a checkout cashier or whatever. And I will tell you this, I have never hidden that I'm a flirt. But I was in monogamous relationships at that point, even though they were technically not. And I would never cheat and I would never lie about it. I would end a relationship before I did that. And they said slut like it's a bad thing. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. The way they said it was a bad thing, because they were saying it as if not only I was, having sex with people, but I was cheating and lying about it and doing all of the things that actually my ex-boyfriend did, right? The part where I felt jealous. So, yeah, I mean, they were definitely using it in a not good way, right? Roger says, I agree. I'm glad to hear you say it. It's rare to hear people talking about non monogamy admit it. One of my problems has always been people like acting like everything is always fine. Everything is not always fine in non-monogamy any more than everything is always fine in any relationship. I can tell you that I'm personally happier and more well adjusted in a non monogamous relationship, but it's not all like sunshine and roses and glitter unicorn farts, right? I still have non monogamous relationships with humans, and I am still very much as human as I can possibly be. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cobalt say, people want your zhuzh for life and think they can get it by having you. And Jan says, in that case, I think it's fear of loss of control. I definitely think that that's part of it. But again, let's turn this around, right? When I felt jealousy, when I felt real jealousy, and I have felt it in my relationships, it's not for me been a result of people interacting with other people or having sex with other people or, relating to other people. It's been when I've started to feel that distance pulling us apart. And so an accusation can actually create more of that distance, which then creates more of that jealousy, which then creates more of that distance, and so on and so forth, and really starts ripping things apart. So insecurity can really start wearing and tearing and causing experiences that create jealousy kind of out of thin air, right? And in that case, going back to what Zaphod said, trust issues. Cobalt says many accusations are confessions. Yep, 100%. So jealousy in non-monogamy is a huge factor for many people in every kind of relationship, even in friendships, right? Like you have a friend that you see a lot and you spend a lot of time with, and suddenly they start spending a lot of time with somebody else and they're not available for you and whatever. And you start to feel that distance. You start to feel that maybe they're like not being as open with you and not being as clear with you as they used to be and not communicating in the same way. And suddenly you're starting to feel it, right? Multiply that by love and by sex, and you have very big potential problems. Zaphod says 100% agree that insecurity and distrust leads to jealousy. It does. It absolutely does. And I'm not saying, let me be clear, I'm not saying that that's the only thing that leads to jealousy. Jealousy is a very human emotion. There is nothing particularly wrong with jealousy. We don't like feeling it. We call it negative. It is like every other emotion we experience, a signal from the part of our brain that we can't really talk to directly to us saying, there is something here you need to be looking at, right? In my case, it was, I feel he's lying. I feel he's pushing me back so I don't get close enough to the truth. I feel there's a distance between us, whatever, right? In some cases, it might be I'm feeling radically insecure and I don't feel like my partner is doing the same things that they used to do in order to soothe me. And that makes me more insecure, right? So I think it's important when we have jealousy in our lives, regardless of whether we're monogamous or non monogamous, to listen to what it's telling us. And if we can't hear it, sit with that jealousy and say, what are we missing? What am I feeling the loss of? What am I fearing the loss of in my relationship? And it's very rarely, I think they're going to leave me. It's more often, this thing isn't happening anymore. And I wonder why, and so on and so forth, right? I think that's important. Roger says, I've never had an issue with the sex. It's always been about what's not said. It was about the lies and the hidden feelings. That's key, right? Because again, for me, I feel that the only way to really do non monogamy is to be ethical about it, which means communicating about it, talking about it, being open about it, and so on and so forth. And there are so many people who step into this and they're not prepared to be open, even if they have permission to do all of this, right? So, yeah. Um, Moving on. Jealousy. Okay, what's wrong with non monogamy? Jealousy. Next thing, communication. Roger, communication. We are generally not taught how to communicate well with other humans in relationships, period. I mean, most of the relationships I know, most of the people in relationships that I know can't stand the idea of having deep, intimate relationships. My partner and I, we were out with some friends on New Year's Eve day, and we had plans for the evening. So we were taking our leave, and they're like, "Hey, what are you guys gonna go do?" And I said, "Yeah, we've got a date night tonight, and we're gonna have a state of the relationship chit chat." And there were two other couples there, and both of them went, "Oh God, I'm so sorry," or something like that. And I was like, "No, no, no. This is good. We're excited about this. We're looking forward to coming together and preparing for the new year." People don't like to communicate in their relationships. They think of like communication as a negative, as something that is hurtful and harmful and leads to strife. And that is a challenge. And the deeper into our relationships we get, the more critical that communication is going to be. Because as we get deeper into entanglements, if in love, in the feels, we have more potential for harm. And communication is how we get around that. The more love and the more sex we have, the more communication is required to keep things going well. And in non monogamy, we might be having a lot of love and a lot of sex, or our partners are. And we're often not prepared with the tools we need to communicate well. And Jeanne just said, so many people are not honest with themselves. How can they be honest with others? Exactly. So, or even like, how do we hold and tell our own truths? Sometimes we can't because we might not know them completely because of other issues in a relationship. I know there's several people that are in the stream right now who are in my Take No Shit Boundaries workshop. And one of the things that a lot of people don't put time into in their lives is really figuring out, what are their boundaries? What is you? What isn't you? And the longer you're in a relationship, right? The longer that you are maybe giving up a little bit of this to keep the peace and giving up a little bit of that because it doesn't really matter anyway, and they don't like it, and so on and so forth, you lose track of who you are. And then when it comes time to communicate, you may not even know exactly what you're thinking and feeling, right? Joshua says they heard, we need to talk. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, totally. Exactly. We need to talk. Cobalt, how many of us were thanked by our parents for asking for what we want rather than punished? And let's just take this into adulthood. How many of us are thanked by our partners for asking for what we want? Like, seriously, something so simple. Hey, baby, I really, really need some romantic time, and I'm hoping we can fit it in this week. What does your schedule look like? Oh my goodness, thank you so much for saying that, because things are crazy and I might not have been able to set aside the time if you had waited any longer. Let's look at the calendar and figure this out. Right? Let's hold off on that one for a minute. It is I love you, then the big butt. That's what we're afraid of. Well, I've got a big butt and nobody's afraid of it. No kidding. Yeah, here's the thing though. If that's what we run into in a relationship, then we need to figure out how to get around that big butt, or that the relationship just isn't going to work, rather than trying to just deny or ignore it, right? Hello, Sabyasachi. Hello, Sexy Mexi. Let's get back to this one. What's your opinion about cuckolding? I love it. It's wonderful. And coming up next Monday, hashtag Cuck Week. If you go to cuckweek.com, you can get information on scheduling and so on and so forth. Going to be a big week-long event online to learn all about it from people all across the web, for those who are interested. I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the weekend that's coming up. It's Not Cheating weekend right there, notcheating.com. When I talk about, I'm doing a workshop on asymmetrical or unequal non-monogamy. And so I'm going to be talking about like cuckolding and hot wifing and pimping and harems and OPPs and so on and so forth. So we're going to be talking about how to make those work and how to run them ethically. So, yeah. Cobalt says, radical idea. Thanks someone for setting boundaries. Not so radical, just not often done. Sabyasachi, welcome back after a long time. Thank you. And I've got this week, next week, and then the week after, and then I'll be gone again because I'm going in for my 2 major surgeries. So yeah, Jan, yes, Stag and Vixen, exactly. Zaphod, good to communicate. Wants and needs 100% agree. In a DS relationship, subs find it hard to bring up their needs at times, I've found. Absolutely. And I don't know if you're a D or an S, although I'm guessing a D from the way you've said that. And as a D myself, one of the things that I put a lot of effort into is focusing in on talking with submissives or bottoms about their boundaries and encouraging them to talk to me about their needs, their wants, their desires, their fears, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I won't actually play or engage with anyone that I don't feel can talk about that stuff, because I need them to be able to tell me what they need and want if we're going to have a mutually beneficial relationship or playtime, right? It's new for you, the boundaries thing, being thanked about boundaries. It's a wonderful thing, I have to say. Absolutely wonderful. Oh, so for those of you who are not familiar, takenoshit.curiouser.life. That's where you can find out about my boundaries workshop. It is at your own pace. There are tons of lessons already in there, worksheets, etc. So if you feel like maybe you could stand to brush up on your boundaries, that's the way to do it. Okay, so far we've talked about what is wrong with non-monogamy: jealousy and communication. Okay, so Interestingly enough, the next item on my list is lack of personal boundaries. This is one of my huge soapboxes, as Cobalt says. My workshop is totally fuckballs amazing, and the BASF book. So I'm working on a book. I've slowed down over the holiday called Boundaries Are Sexy as Fuck. I've got about 50 chapters in, and I'm working on more. So boundaries is a big, big soapbox for me. Personal boundaries are to me, the biggest factor in creating a successful relationship. They are the key to not only saving ourselves, but saving our relationships. Boundaries are how we know where we end and others begin. They're where we set our limits and how we interact and what we're willing to accept in our lives. And so few people do the work on personal boundaries before any relationship, even friendship. Friendships grow so much stronger when you both have good boundaries. And the more intense a relationship, like adding in love and sex, pair bonding, for example, the more pressure there is on the boundaries, because the more intense you are, the more that desire to merge, to be alike, to avoid conflict grows. And then with non-monogamy and potentially multiple intense relationships, it's easy for boundaries to get crossed or squashed or ignored because there's just so much going on, right? So a lack of personal boundaries and non-monogamy is a huge issue. And I'm going to be doing a workshop this weekend, notcheating.com, specifically talking about boundaries in non-monogamy. Of course, 1.5 hours is not going to be enough time to go over everything I have to say about boundaries because I've written like 50 chapters and I'm teaching a workshop and whatever. But I'll get a good start on some of the most critical boundary thinking that you're going to want to be doing to be successful in any sort of non-monogamous relationship. So, Sexy Mexi, my girlfriend and I like cuck things, but I'm not ready. If you're not ready, you're not ready. Do though check out hashtag Cuck Week and cuckweek.com, because again, there's a lot coming up over the course of this week, and you can learn from people who are doing this thing and maybe not make some of the same mistakes that we've made. Also check out if you have a real interest, Bullfriend, BULLFRIEND.life. Okay, Sabyasachi, here's a point of discussion. What's your opinion on marriage in non-monogamous relationships? Same as in monogamous relationships. Do it if you want to. Don't do it if you don't want to. Friday night, the 27th, at 7 p.m., we're actually kicking off It's Not Cheating with with attorney Lady Steele, who is a practicing attorney in Georgia who is both kinky and non-monogamous. And she's going to be talking with us about the legalities that you might want to be considering if you're going to be creating non-monogamous relationships. And so when it comes to marriage, it really depends, because like marriage grants you a whole lot of like legal bonuses, right? But you can get those through contracts. But if you're going to be like swinging or whatever, being married is neither here nor there. If you're going to be doing things more like relationship anarchy and getting really deep into the everybody could possibly be, equal and so on and so forth, then, maybe that's something that you don't really want to like put everything into. And you might want to go the individual contract standpoint. So, okay, so we've talked about jealousy, we've talked about communication, we've talked about a lack of personal boundaries, and then here's a big, big issue in non monogamy: lack of personal accountability. Most of us are not raised to be personally accountable. In fact, most of us are raised to do what other people tell us to do, to try to fit in and go with the flow. The media that we're constantly bombarded with on like Facebook and so on and so forth is often about how others treat us and how others push us around, and very rarely about how we allow ourselves to be treated or what we put up with. And so the way these things are phrased makes it so much easier to shift blame for actions onto others. Even our actions within our, you made me so mad, you hurt me so much, whatever it is. And when that happens, it makes us feel like other people not in our relationships even, have control over how we can connect and love and spend time and all things, right? And it happens in monogamy too. Every one of us has probably been in a relationship where someone, somewhere said that they would miss a date or an important event because their significant other person, not necessarily, if this is monogamy, it's not like their pair bonded partner, but like their mother, their brother, their best friend, their boss told them they needed something from them, right? So they canceled. The issue is not when that happens. It's when the partner does not take ownership and accountability for that and puts the blame on the other person, right? They don't just say, oh, I have this conflict and I really feel it's important for me to spend this time with my brother. They'll be like, oh, my brother, he was just whining and bitching that he never gets to see me. And he was like, well, this is the only time that he has. And if I don't do it, he's going to be just like this. So I'm really sorry. But, he just, won't leave me be. Right. We've all done it. We've all done it, and we've all been subject to it, right? When it happens regularly, though, it begins to feel like you're no longer an important deciding factor in your own relationship. And that's hard. And part of it is that you're giving all of the deciding factors over to somebody else, right? Now, if it's hard in monogamy when that happens, imagine that in non-monogamy, the other person is nearly always another partner, right? And your mutual partner is constantly being pulled this way, that, never willing to take ownership of their decision-making. And this is where resentments build up and jealousies get out of hand, and people often try to manage or control their partners and their partners' partners in order to feel some sort of stability and control over their own lives, where Cobalt says, quite rightly, the problem with thinking we have no choice. And in that instance, you don't have a choice over what they do. You never have a choice over what they do, but you do have a choice over what you do. And again, we're not raised to think or behave that way. So it's often really, really difficult to take that and say, how can I put this on me? How can I take control for me to move forward with my life. Zorro asks, do you prefer monogamy or non-monogamy? I would actually say right now, I definitely prefer non-monogamy. But I would also say that I could probably and have in the past lived happily as a monogamous person as well. The key for me at this point is that I'm having so much fun with non monogamy. My partner is non monogamous. So there's no friction there. Excuse me. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Um, and I have all these skills that I've developed to interact in non-monogamous ways that would then benefit if I ever do go back to monogamy. So, yeah. So the problem is that none of these things, jealousy, communication, boundaries, accountability, are specifically wrong with non-monogamy. They're wrong with how we humans interact with each other, how we've learned unhealthy habits in creating and maintaining relationships, how we react to threats in our relationships. And like I've said, they happen in monogamous relationships. They happen in friendships. It's a flaw in how we're taught to interact with each other from a very, very young age. In how TV shows and movies present love and sex, in how our first relationships teach us about interaction, and in how we try to mirror and mimic the relationships we see around us, our parents, our friends, our aunts, our uncles, the people on TV. And the only way to fix these things is to fix ourselves, to choose what we are willing to accept in our lives and what we're not, and to be accountable for those things. But that's really hard. And it goes back to boundaries again. It can take a lot of time to shift our perspectives to such a personally vulnerable view. Zorro asks, how to overcome jealousy to get involved in non-monogamous relationships. So interestingly, I am going to be hosting a free, let's just pop this in here, 5-day non-monogamy challenge next week, right there, notcheating.com/challenge, doop, 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 right there. Free to join. And I'm going to be talking about the 5 most critical skills for successful non-monogamy, and jealousy is one of them. So I would actually say join me. It doesn't cost you anything. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to have some fun. You're going to meet some interesting people. And we're going to talk about jealousy. And I'm going to tell you how to engage with your jealousy, how not to react poorly from jealousy, and how and why you should make friends with your jealousy. So I would definitely suggest that, Zorro. Cobalt says, I heard once jealousy is a fear of impermanence. Remove the fear and jealousy is gone. But I still haven't learned how to get past the fear of impermanence. I don't agree with that. I don't. Because I'm not afraid ever of impermanence. People will be talking with us and they'll be like, oh my gosh, you are so adorable, the two of you. I just want to eat you up, how long have you been together? And I'm like, 9.5 years, almost 10 years. Like, oh my goodness. And you're still so cute. Oh. And I'm like, yeah, so far. So far. I'm not afraid of impermanence. The fear and insecurity of jealousy for me comes from that barrier of intimacy and communication. Like, if we start growing apart, I'm okay with that. But if we start lying to each other, if we start putting up intentional walls, that's where, for me, I don't like it. And I start feeling those type of things. My wife and I are only semi open because she cannot deal with jealousy. Any advice? Yeah, again, pop into both of you, pop into the notcheating.com challenge 5 days next week, Monday through Friday, 5 videos. We're going to tackle what I consider to be the 5 most critical skills when it comes to non-monogamy. And one of those days, Wednesday, is going to be specifically focusing in on jealousy. Absolutely. 100%. And then let me just double check, because later this week, yeah, I mean, I'll be talking a little bit about jealousy in each of the topics this week, but next week, that'll be the big one for sure. Zayfad, would living with one or more non-monogamous partners amp up many of the issues of communication, boundaries, and so on? I think that really depends. I live with my partner, and I mean, living together there's definitely things that go along with living together that make relationships easier, and there are things that go along with living together that make them more difficult, right? Like, because if you live together and you see each other every day, and like, they fart at night or whatever it is, sometimes it's hard to keep like that gimme going, right? But you also develop like deep intimacy and patterns of behavior where you move and, sort of like interact as one, which can cause some strife in other relationships. So the human existence is a wonderfully complex quilt. And the more we exist, the more intensely we exist, the more deeply we exist with people, with more people, the more we're going to have to deal with messiness, right? Cobalt fears death, and Joshua feels chompy snacks. I love snacks and their boop snoots. So, real quick, let me just say, there we go, notcheating.com. So tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel, we're going to be coming back but when do we get to the eggplant, water droplets, peach, right? So we're going to be talking about when do we get to the like sexy stuffs. And that's going to be tomorrow. Friday, we're going to be talking about the veto, or how most polyamory groups get this wrong. And then on Saturday, since yesterday I was at a medical appointment, we're going to talk about ethical and consensual applies to your hookups too. So we've got a few more quickies coming up, and then we're going to be heading directly into both hashtag Cuck Week and the It's Not Cheating Challenge, and then into the It's Not Cheating Weekend. Thinker says, I'm about to go into a cuckold relationship, but I have a lot of shame. I highly suggest check out Cuck Week. Scarlett and Anya. Anya does a lot of talking around shame. She and I at one point are hopefully going to get together and actually do a project focused in on shame. So there's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be some discussion going around next week during Cuck Week that is going to be, focusing in on the types of shame that you might experience. And then, oh yeah, Cobalt. Cobalt says, Thinker, Nookie, that's me, did a workshop during the summer about using negative emotions in play. Yeah, so that's part of our Plus membership. If you have any curiosity about that, don't hesitate to reach out. You can, let's see, actually, you know what I should do? I should say hello at curiouser.life. And so if you'd like to reach out, hello at curiouser.life if you have any questions, or you can call or text 919-299-1108. Yes, Sabyasachi. Scarlett, oops, didn't mean to do that. Scarlett and Anya from the Flaming Yanni podcast, the Slut Sisters. And Anya has some really amazing, has done some really amazing work in, deep shame stuff, sexual shamanism, and that sort of thing. So, Cobalt, if you need to fix your account, you know what to do. Anyway, I will see you all tomorrow. Again, we'll be talking about, but when do we get to the nudge, nudge, wink, wink? Know what I mean? Know what I mean? And we'll go from there. So thanks, y'all. Have an amazing